Our scripture reading this morning, two readings. First from the book of Matthew, chapter 6. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And from the book of Malachi. Malachi, one of the later prophets of the Old Testament. From Malachi 3, verse 10. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, God. Thinking about the thing when you run out of room. I've always had a deep affection for all things vintage. My Auntie Laurie is a chip off the old block. We love all things that are period kind of pieces. Antiques we like too. Those are about anything 100 years old. But vintage, kind of something within a particular era of time. So when she comes to visit us, there is nothing, when she comes up from Ashland, that will seal our visit. Before she's done, we have to go to this superlative vintage shop on Fremont called Rerun, where you can get all kinds of retro and vintage pieces. We've got more vintage clothes and shoes than we should have, than we need. We try to imagine what people in that era, women in that era who wore those clothes, might be like compared to today. Annie wishes that she could have grown up in the 60s and 70s like I did. Her favorite show is the 70s show. She loves the furniture, the music, the clothes, the stacked shoes, all of that stuff. During her recent trip home to see both of her grandmothers, one in Tennessee and one in Virginia, just rather unexpectedly, they took a trip down memory lane when both grandmothers and families opened up family photographs, some of which she had seen and some of which she had not seen. She didn't realize that her dad, for example, had super curly hair when he was a kid, so much that people thought he was a girl, and that he started wearing glasses when he was 18 months old. She didn't realize that her mother used to wear those huge blue stacked strappy sandals and green shimmery eyeshadow, and that I wore macrame belts and bell-bottom jeans. She said, "Mom, I'm loving it." That's what I wish I could have lived in. She went gaga over that stuff when she saw it. And she was taking pictures of those photographs and sending them to me faster than I knew how to receive them or download them, and it crashed my phone. And so I had to take it to T-Mobile and say, "Help me." It was a simple mistake, but I like to blame it on her. Really sentimental, she called me and said, "Mom, I cannot believe that I didn't know this part of your life, where you are doing the splits in your pom-pom outfit, you know. I had no idea that you and Dad," of course she knew we were kids, but it just gives me a whole new way to love you and understand you. And she said, "I really treasure these things that grandmas have shared with me." And before she hung up, not just because it fits with the sermon, I will say to you what she said to me. She said, "Oh, Mom, my heart is just so full." And for a child who struggled with eating disorders, she said, "I can tell you this." And with some depression and anxiety, to hear this kid say, "My heart is so full," makes our mama sing. I am so happy that she has found new things to be joyful in, new treasures. Where your treasure is. As much as I read through the myriad of texts to prepare for Sunday morning sermons, you can imagine that I pore over what I'm going to preach during stewardship, because I'm just glad you all are here, because I know what stewardship sermons are like. Here's a couple of guests, and I went back and said, "Heads up, it's a stewardship Sunday." They actually saw it in advance, but they came. And I've asked them, don't let them get up, because I want them to hear what Cecil has to say, especially. So how do you choose what you're going to preach on we're in stewardship. There's any number of verses that pop up, and every year Matthew 6 raises its hand and runs to the front of the line and wants to be preached. You know, your treasures, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. Don't worry about your life and about your possessions, and don't be so anxious. But do you know there are over 2,300 verses on money that I could have chosen from? So over 2,300 verses on money. Did you know 16 of Jesus' 38 parables talk about money and possessions and the use of them? And that Jesus talked more about money than he did about faith and prayer combined. And then in the Gospels, an amazing 1 out of 10 verses, 1 out of 10 verses, 288 in all, deal directly with the subject of money. So what's up with this? Maybe God knew that our Achilles heel was going to be about our money. Maybe that's why there's so much conversation about it. So as I read this text and thought about my conversation with Annie and thought, oh, this is a perfect text to preach on, these are some of the things that I thought about as I was writing the sermon. What makes something a treasure? What is that pearl of great price that's so valuable and so priceless that you wouldn't give it up for anything? You wouldn't let your brother or sister go in your room and get it or steal it from your heart. What is that? What makes my heart full? What makes my heart sing? You all know that one of the things I don't do very well is play. Because I've got to do God's work. I'm so busy and serious. And Ken Kramer said, you need to get on your bike and get a life. And so he keeps inviting me to bike ride. And so I went with he and a buddy yesterday. I didn't even know him, but by the time we were through, we were having a prayer meeting in the Singer Hill coffee shop. And I had a crash. I kind of got unsteady on my bike and had a crash, and you should have seen these two guys trying to help me up. But I had a blast because I was out doing something for me and not just worrying about the church, which I have a tendency to do, and that's my own stuff. That's my own issues about being perfect, which is, you all know I'm not that for sure. But spiritually mature folks make me happy too. People who are trying to grow in their faith and make connections. Nature makes me happy. Then I ask the question, what am I stockpiling these days? What am I stockpiling as if, I'm going to need it when the end of the world comes. I'm just going to need it. And y'all, my Achilles heel, books, shoes, and clothes. Books, shoes, and clothes. We've all got it. Those are mine. And I have to constantly fight that. Even though it's secondhand, I'll say, it's secondhand, it doesn't matter. If you don't need it, you don't need it. You know what? Deb Geis pulls up the other day and brings me 2 bags of clothes. I said, what, do you hate me? Stop this. She's trying to discipline me too much. So I want you to know I went through it, I kept what I could use, and I gave the rest away. Yes, I did. She told me I could. What are my fears about money? What are my fears about? It's interesting, the whole thing about clothing. I think a lot of what's tied in that is, do I feel like I have enough or I am enough? Am I enough without my clothes? And that's one of my struggles. I have to ask myself the question. Ask yourself the question, with whatever you struggle with. Is it, do you feel like you have enough or are you worthy enough? Just interesting questions, and I have not that there's anything wrong with nice things, but if it controls you rather than you controlling it, then you know what those things are. And what would happen as a pastor, if I just went ahead and jumped over your fear of what you would think of me if I preached to you about Malachi 3:10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse? A lot of preachers don't like to preach on that. Because, people can tithe in different ways. They can give to different organizations, and that counts. And yes, it does. But I want to really challenge you. What would it mean for you to bring a full tithe into the storehouse? If you're not there yet, one of the things I want to challenge you to do is make that a goal. Did you see the step chart? And where do you fall on the step chart? And if you have a fear about money, what is that fear? And is it founded? Have you ever had a time that you didn't have enough? Have you ever had a time that you didn't have enough? And if you didn't have enough, then how were you able to resolve it? My guess is that you were. I want us to step up in faith and see if God will throw open the floodgates so that we won't have room enough to store what God gives us. So I want to offer this challenge to you. We're reading a book as church leaders called Rich Church, Poor Church. Fascinating book. It says we really need to function on the premise that the church has abundance and not scarcity, and not talk so much about numbers. But I think talking about some numbers just to give you information will be helpful as you try to make decisions. I am convinced, folks, that if every one of us took seriously these next 2 weeks of the campaign, if we went home and talked together as a family, if we re-examined our budget and reprioritized some of the things that are important, if we made some measured sacrifices, and get your kids involved too. Sometimes we overindulge our kids. I did. Sometimes we do that. And once your 2020 pledge is completed, if you made that, I want to challenge you, what would it be like if you rolled that money back into the annual budget? If not all of it, then some of it. You've not used it, you probably have missed it. Maybe you've missed it, but you haven't had it. So what would it be if you did that? Or if folks would in faith take one step up on the giving chart? If everybody would do that, if everybody would give at a 10% level, the church would have all the money it needs. We wouldn't need anything else. On a 2020 $700,000 budget, which is what people have sent requests in, can you believe people dream that big, from $500,000 to $700,000? Jeff in the background, the church council chair, went, $700,000. Can we do that? Well, with 122 pledging units, that would mean that we would have to give, as a unit, $5,738 a year, or $110 weekly. On a $600,000 budget, that means that the 122 giving units would have to give $4,918, or $95 weekly. We have more people that fall in that category of not reaching that than above. There are different reasons for that. Some of us are single, our lives took a spill, some of us are helping family members out, others of us have other commitments, the others don't know, but that's between you and God. All I'm saying is something to think about. What if we all stepped up at least a step or two, or made it a goal that in the next 3 to 5 years, with the 5 years being the max, that we are going to be a tither, that we're literally going to give 10% of our income. The average Methodist gives only 2%. Did you know that? Only 2%. I wonder what part fear plays in that, or I wonder what part indifference plays in that. You have done it before with your 2020 giving. I've never seen the church do what you all have done through this awesome campaign where you trusted God and you went out and you reached beyond yourself and gave. I say this not as a way to bring any glory to myself, but because if I'm going to preach tithing, you need to know where I am and what I do. I tithe, and I've done so for about 19 years of my ministry. It took steps to get there, but I made it, and I'm so excited, and I couldn't preach it unless I was willing to do it. Gary gives to his church, I do to my church. Currently, Lisa Fu writes me a check for $5,245 each month. $5,245. I put half of that into savings because we as pastors, we're this anomaly for the federal government, so I have to pay quarterly taxes. So I put half of that in savings, and so each month, I've just paid my full tithe, which is $4,800, but my hope is to give an additional $200 to make it to $5,000. If you do the math, that means that I give $400 a month, and I tithe that on my net salary, not on my gross salary. Whether you do that on your net or gross is up to you. It's between you and God. My goal is to do that on my net. It's going to be a leap because of other commitments I have and some family members that we help. That's a commitment we've made, but that is my goal and that is my commitment. I'm praying about that. I also give to things like you do, like the youth auction and Jazz Feast and other mission opportunities. Again, I say that not to say, oh, look what I do, but to tell you, I preach it because I do it, and it makes me happy to be able to do it. It brings so much joy to be able to know that I've done this and it's in faith, and sometimes it's a little tight, but I do it because I can't ask you to do it if I'm not going to do it, and because I'm that grateful for God's blessings in my life. So here's something to consider before we invite Cecil up. Not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. Not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. Cecil, come up and talk to us. Cecil has been, maybe we'll go to 5 or 10 after. Leave if you need to. Cecil has been one of my most blessed agitators since I've been here. He will not let me rest. He asks me all kinds of questions. Why do you say that when you read the scripture? Tell me what you believe about the cross. What would you preach at my funeral if I asked you to preach my funeral? He keeps me on my toes because he's a thinking Christian, not just accepting everything at face value. He's a bit unconventional, some of you may think, in some of his thoughts, but I really like him because he's refreshing and challenging, and every time I sit with him, I learn something new, because I think one of your Achilles heels is books. I know you've got a lot of them, but that's an okay thing. Also, he keeps me on my toes because he's a tither. Unswervingly so, and he has been for years. He'll tell you about that. And also, because he has these wild dreams. He's sending 5 bequest things to us. You're off the chart. We were even, 11? I have 5 of them. We were even sitting in a meeting, and one of his friends said, "What a crazy idea is that? Who said that?" And when we told him it was his friend, he apologized profusely. He has this wild imagination. So I've got a couple of questions I want to ask Cecil. We talked about this in advance, but we decided we wanted it to be kind of organic. And what happens, happens. One of the things Cecil's trained in, and I'm starting to get trained in, is one-on-one relationships with each other and just asking questions to get to know each other better. So, okay, so Cecil, I left my sermon notes over there, but I think I've got it here. So I want to ask you, let me pop over here. Why do you give to the church, and how did you develop the practice of doing that?
Probably easier to explain how I developed the practice. My father was a pastor in a Christian church, Disciples.
Yeah.
And he always taught me that it was important whenever I earned any money and had any money to share it.
Yeah.
And so that's how it got started.
So how long have you, so you told me that you're a tither. How long have you been a tither?
Well, more than 58 years, I know, because Jan and I, when we were married, that was a choice that we decided to make as a part of our marriage agreement.
That you would just tithe. So do you miss the money, or?
No, I don't miss it because the other part of the tithing was basically, sorry with this voice.
That's fine.
The choice was basically to make sure that it came out first. So as a consequence, we were always looking at the balance as part of what we lived with, and so we never really missed it.
Okay. Because you just started that practice early.
Right.
You know, when you grow up in a family like this, they project all those expectations on you, but it's not always a bad thing, because it's stuck with him. For those who are not quite there yet, how would you encourage them to take a step?
Well, I think the first step is basically to make it the priority. That is, do it first, and then see what you have left to live with.
Yeah.
And then year by year, you can increase that a little bit till you get to a time.
Yeah. Again, it's hard when you have family, and you know, I know for me with my child early, and when I wanted to expose her to everything that I could expose her to. And I think part of what we have to do is we have to really sit down as families together and talk about what our priorities are. Is there a way that we can reprioritize? Do we need to give money to this? Is there something, for example, what would happen if we took one less vacation a year and banked that money and gave it as seed money for the new preschool we want to start? That it was a faith offering to the preschool because we decided to take one less vacation. I mean, we could all make those changes. We could all do things like that. So let's see. What do you believe about the church today and its relevance and its future? This is one thing Cecil and I talk a lot about. We've had a lot of coffee together. He's in the Kroger Sunday school class, and he'll probably tell you about that, but I'd like to know what you think about the church and its relevancy.
I was basically looking to see who was here because typically I go to the second service, and mostly I see gray hair. But
Or no hair.
Or no hair. And I think it concerns me. We know, I mean, all the statistics we know is that church membership is going down. So the question that I frequently think about is, am I interested in church membership growing, or am I concerned about the people that are missing what the church has to offer? And I think in a lot of ways, the younger generation millennials, Generation X, Y, so forth, are missing the values that you learn when you come to church. And kind of missing the sense of responsibility. And the sad part is, I think a lot of them don't even realize that. And our culture is being formed, and our values are being formed by media.
Yeah. And a great number of folks talk about the social isolation that they feel, the social isolation. You know what I'm saying? Isolation. Yeah, because everything is done online, the connectivity of the face-to-face is not there as much as it used to be. What Cecil says is so important, and he and I've talked a lot about it. You know, we plan events and assume people are going to show up at the church, and one of the things that you said on your bequest form is that you think that we do need to broaden our staffing so that we can have people that focus specifically on, while we're focusing on our own congregates and building our capacity for pastoral care and hiring staff people that can help us expand that ministry. We also think that we may need, like, you know, yesterday Ken and I out with his buddy, we were sitting in the coffee shop having church on a Saturday morning talking about Jesus. It was incredible. We really need to be able to do more things like that, not like the traditional church like this.
So are you on Facebook?
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of friends?
I have 800, 900 friends.
So how much time does that take of yours?
Oh, chase this link and that. I have to discipline myself in that too. Why do you ask?
I'm just curious. I'm on Facebook, and I have all of my relatives that I keep track of, but I'm very careful about not responding to anything.
Oh, you're just kind of checking things out.
Right.
Yeah. You're in the Progress Sunday School class. What is that, and why do you do that? It meets 8:30 every Sunday morning, and you've met for like 40 years?
Well, I haven't. Yes, the class is...
Yeah, at the end of the hallway on the far left, the old library.
Well, one of the issues it's been about 200 years since the theologians have thought about what the historical Jesus was like and what we might have missed in the interim period through the church's structure. Yeah. And so part of the Progress class is kind of to engage in what is the current theological thinking. And my thought is that if the theologians at all of our universities are basically teaching new things, which I think they are, we might be missing out if we don't look at that. And so I'm concerned about it. So part of the program is to investigate.
And to probe. I think every church needs a probing class. You know, there are some folks in that class that would classify themselves as agnostic. Some would say they're atheists. Some would say they're just querying. They're not sure where they are. But I think it's beautiful that the church has a place for them. That they feel like it's a safe place that they can discuss these things and they can work out this stuff together and find community. And I know you also have a small group that meets outside of that, going for just dinner and movies and just for community.
Yeah, there's a couple of small groups basically formed in the church that we meet with.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to ask Cecil, but please know that you could take him out for a cup of coffee and engage him. You could tell him more. He came up with 11 ideas for that bequest form. Oh my gosh. And some of them were just incredible. He talked about what would happen if we bought the Palisades grocery store and used it for Family Promise or after-school programs or as a satellite center for church. He talked about hiring additional staff. He talked about bringing theologians in who could talk about interesting topics, expand our minds. He talked about the importance of expanding multimedia and that this is the way people talk today, folks. It's just not an option. He talked about, establishing an endowment fund for outreach. So we could say a word about any of these you want to as we close and why you came up with these wild imaginings.
The Palisades is not as wild as it might seem. I know we lived in West Lynn, where Lutheran was. The Christian church, right across the street from the shopping area, leased space in the shopping area to take care of the kids that were at the intermediate school, so they have a place after school, because there are a lot of them were latchkey kids.
Yes.
And they needed a place. So they had a place to meet with some supervision.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a great idea, and we're close to a high school.
Yeah.
And, oh, wow, there's space over there. So it's just like, it seemed natural. And then there are just a lot of things you could do with such a space. I mean, Family Promise, we could use that for services for Family Promise, for kids after school. It could be a community center. Part of I see the message of the church is being able to go to a space or a location that isn't church, that a non-church person can feel comfortable going into. So there could even be Saturday worship services there. Right? So,
Absolutely.
so it wasn't so much about that specific place. It's like trying to, well, we're a box.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think out of that box.
Dream big. You also said that your father started a really cool program as a pastor back after the war. Say a word about that.
Yeah, when I was in grade school, we moved to Macon, Georgia, and they wanted to start a new church. So my dad suggested, and they did, build first a very large youth center. It had a bowling alley in the basement, pool tables, ping pong, bottom floor and top floor where they did their worship. And that brought the whole community into that church experience. And then when they had a larger group in that, they built a large sanctuary, administration unit, and so forth. So.
Wow, that was the vision of early time. Cecil, we can talk more and more. Our time is out. But is there any final thing that you want to say to the congregation? And please, folks, if you've never sat down with him, he is a walking encyclopedia of ideas and visions, and it's worth taking him to Starbucks to find out. Anything you want to close? Okay. Can we thank him for sharing with us? If you need to leave, please by all means do. If you could stay for the closing, feel free to do that.
And we are grateful for that wonderful inspirational message. We are grateful for everything, aren't we, that God has given to us. And on behalf of our staff and our program leaders, we do wish you all a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving and ask that you remember to thank God for all those blessings that we receive. So.